The haunted subway. What lurks beneath the forgotten station will freeze your blood. When the sun dips below the horizon and shadows creep into forgotten corners, that's when the stories come alive. Welcome to the Foggy Bard, where the line between the real and the imagined blurs. Tonight, we descend into the dark depths of an abandoned subway station, a place where silence isn't empty but filled with whispers of the past. Sit back, listen close, and remember, some mysteries are better left undiscovered. I've always been fascinated by the hidden layers of the city, the forgotten tunnels, abandoned stations, and crumbling ruins buried beneath our feet. So, when I heard about an old subway station that had been sealed off for decades, I couldn't resist. They called it Station 103, and according to urban legend, it was closed after a tragic accident that claimed the lives of several passengers. But the official records? They barely mentioned it. Just maintenance issues. I wasn't alone in my curiosity. My friend Alex, an urban explorer like me, was the one who brought it up. He said he'd found an access point through an old service tunnel. It sounded risky, but that's part of the thrill, right? Entering the forgotten station. We went late at night to avoid prying eyes. The entrance was hidden behind a rusted maintenance gate, half buried in graffiti and debris. The air inside was stale and damp, carrying the faint smell of rust and something sour. Alex led the way with his flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness like a lifeline. The first thing that struck me was the silence. It wasn't the normal kind of quiet. It was oppressive, almost alive. Every step echoed too loudly, as if the walls themselves were listening. When we finally reached the platform, it was like stepping into a time capsule. The tracks were overgrown with moss, and faded advertisements for long-defunct products lined the walls. A single ancient subway car sat on the tracks, its windows shattered and its exterior corroded. Creepy, but not exactly haunted, Alex joked. He climbed into the car and I followed, my stomach twisting with unease. The first sign. Inside, the car was worse. Seats were torn, graffiti covered every surface, and the floor was littered with debris. But what caught my eye were the scorch marks, blackened streaks running along the walls as if there'd been a fire. Alex shone his flashlight toward the end of the car. "What's that?" he muttered. On the far wall, someone had scrawled a warning in large, jagged letters. "Stay out, it waits below." I laughed nervously, trying to play it cool. Typical graffiti scare tactic. Alex didn't respond. He was staring at the floor. "Do you hear that?" I strained my ears. At first, there was nothing. Then I caught it. A faint tapping sound, rhythmic and deliberate, coming from the far end of the station. Descending into darkness. We stepped back onto the platform, the sound growing louder as we moved toward the source. At the edge of the platform was a narrow staircase leading even deeper underground. It was blocked off by a rusted gate, but the lock had long since been broken. "Should we?" Alex asked, grinning. "We shouldn't," I replied, but we both knew I wasn't going to stop him. The stairs led to a service tunnel, long, narrow, and lined with pipes that dripped steadily onto the floor. The tapping was louder now, echoing through the corridor. It wasn't random, it was deliberate, like footsteps or knocking. At the end of the tunnel, we found a door. It was heavy and reinforced, with an old sign hanging crookedly from a single nail. "Authorized personnel only." Alex pushed it open, and the hinges screamed in protest. The room below. The room was enormous, lit by a single flickering bulb that hung from the ceiling. In the center was a strange, circular pit, surrounded by rusted railings. The air was icy, and the tapping had stopped, replaced by a low, almost imperceptible hum. "What do you think this was?" Alex whispered, leaning over the railing. I shrugged, too focused on the strange symbols carved into the walls. They weren't like any graffiti I'd seen before, intricate patterns that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. Then the hum grew louder. Alex stepped back from the pit. "We should leave." Before I could respond, the light went out. The presence. For a moment, the darkness was absolute. Then we heard it. A deep, guttural sound, like something dragging itself along the floor. My flashlight flickered as I fumbled to turn it on, and when the beam finally cut through the dark, I saw something. It was at the edge of the pit, a shape that defied logic, part shadow, part flesh. Its form seemed to shift and ripple, and in its center were eyes. Not human eyes, but glowing yellow orbs that locked onto us with a predatory stillness. Alex didn't wait. He bolted for the door, and I wasn't far behind. Behind us, the dragging sound grew louder, accompanied by a low guttural growl. We ran, stumbling up the stairs and back onto the platform. As we reached the service tunnel, the sound stopped. We didn't look back. The aftermath. I haven't been back to Station 103, and I don't plan to. Alex says he's fine, but I can tell he's lying. Sometimes I see him flinch at shadows or glance over his shoulder when he thinks no one's watching. As for me, I've started hearing that tapping sound at night. It's faint, just on the edge of hearing, but it's there. I don't know if it followed us, or if it's always been here, waiting. Some doors should stay closed. But don't go anywhere yet. Our next story takes us into an even darker place, where curiosity uncovered something far worse than anyone expected. Stay tuned. The Forgotten Asylum. What we found in the basement will haunt us forever. You've already joined me on one unsettling journey tonight, but the shadows have more stories to tell. Our next tale takes us to the desolate ruins of a long-abandoned asylum, a place where echoes of the past refuse to rest and secrets lie buried beneath the surface. Brace yourself. This is the Foggy Bard, and tonight we uncover what should have stayed forgotten. I've always been drawn to abandoned places. There's a certain thrill in exploring the remnants of a past life, seeing what others left behind. So, when my friend Jake mentioned an old asylum hidden deep in the woods, I couldn't resist. The asylum had been shut down for decades, closed under mysterious circumstances. Rumors swirled about unethical experiments, patient disappearances, and strange noises heard by anyone brave or foolish enough to venture near. It sounded like the perfect place for an adventure. Jake, his girlfriend Emily, and I packed our gear and headed out late one foggy afternoon. By the time we reached the asylum, the sun was dipping low, casting long shadows over the crumbling facade. The building loomed before us, its once grand entrance now choked with vines and decay. The air was heavy as we stepped inside, carrying a faint metallic scent. Dust motes danced in the fading light, streaming through shattered windows. The silence was deafening, broken only by the creak of our footsteps on the warped wooden floors. The discovery. The interior was a maze of peeling wallpaper, overturned gurneys, and abandoned wheelchairs. Faded murals of serene landscapes lined the walls, an ironic contrast to the suffocating tension in the air. We found old patient files scattered across the floor, the ink faded but still legible. Most were mundane, but some mentioned special treatments that made my skin crawl. As we explored deeper, Emily began to grow uneasy. "I don't like this place," she murmured. Jake laughed it off, but I could feel it too, like we were being watched. Then we found the basement door. It was tucked away in a dark corner, half hidden behind a collapsed filing cabinet. The door was heavy, its rusted hinges groaning as Jake forced it open. A rush of cold, damp air greeted us, carrying the unmistakable stench of mildew and something else. Something sour and metallic. "Let's check it out," Jake said, already descending the stairs. Emily hesitated, but I followed him. Curiosity always got the better of me. The basement. The basement was a narrow corridor lined with thick pipes that dripped steadily onto the cracked concrete floor. Our flashlights illuminated doors on either side, each with a small reinforced window. Most of the rooms were empty, their padded walls stained with age. But one door caught my attention. Deep scratches marred the wood, as if someone, or something, had tried desperately to claw their way out. Inside, chains hung from the walls, their rusted surfaces glinting in the faint light. Emily shivered. At the end of the hallway, we found a larger door. It was different, heavier, with a thick iron lock that had been broken long ago. A faded plaque read, "Observation Room 3." Jake didn't hesitate. He pushed it open, and the three of us stepped inside. The operating room. The room was enormous, its walls lined with shelves cluttered with dusty jars. The contents were murky and indistinguishable, though a few seemed to hold preserved specimens. In the center of the room stood a rusted operating table, its leather straps worn and cracked. On the table lay a journal. Its leather cover was cracked, and its pages were yellowed with age. Jake picked it up and began flipping through the entries. "They were experimenting on the patients," he muttered. The notes spoke of invasive procedures and attempts to extract the madness. But the final entry was hastily scrawled, the words barely legible. "The whispers won't stop. They're coming from below. We've dug too deep." Below? That's when we noticed the trapdoor. The trapdoor. The trapdoor was small, reinforced with iron brackets, and slightly ajar. A foul odor wafted up from the darkness below. Jake, of course, wanted to open it fully. Emily begged him to stop, but he ignored her, lifting the door with a loud creak. A narrow shaft led down into the darkness, a rusted ladder bolted to the wall. Jake went first, and I reluctantly followed. The air grew colder as we descended, and the stench grew stronger. At the bottom, we found ourselves in a cavernous space. The walls were rough, as if they'd been dug by hand, and strange symbols were etched into the stone. Bones littered the ground. Animal, I hoped. Then we heard it. A faint, rhythmic tapping echoed through the chamber. At first I thought it was dripping water, but the sound was too deliberate, too human. The entity Jake's flashlight flickered, and the tapping stopped. Then came a low guttural growl reverberating through the air. My chest tightened as a shadow shifted in the corner of the room. When the light steadied, I saw it. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall, emaciated, its skin stretched taut over skeletal limbs. Its face was featureless, save for two glowing yellow eyes that burned with a malevolent intelligence. Jake froze, his flashlight trembling in his hand. "Run," I whispered, barely able to speak. The creature lunged. We bolted for the ladder, scrambling up as fast as we could. The thing was right behind us, its claws scraping against the metal rungs. Emily was waiting at the top, her eyes wide with terror. She slammed the trapdoor shut just as the creature reached it, the thud reverberating through the room. The escape. We didn't stop running until we were outside, gasping for air under the cold night sky. None of us spoke as we climbed into the car and drove away. It's been weeks since that night, but I can't shake the feeling that we left something behind, or worse, brought something back with us. Sometimes, late at night, I hear faint tapping sounds outside my window. I tell myself it's just the wind, but deep down, I know better. Some things are meant to stay buried. Thank you for joining me on these chilling journeys. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Which tale haunted you more, the subway or the asylum? Let us know, and I'll see you next time. Until then, stay curious and stay safe. Disclaimer: these stories are works of fiction, created for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to real events, locations, or individuals is purely coincidental.